Good morning, this is Angie Karen with OmTurtle Yoga Spa and Cafe, and we are on day 2 of our yogathon. I'm about ready to kick off our Yoga 101 for Beginners class today. And basically what it's going to look like is I'm going to very slowly walk you through the practices and the principles of yoga. I'm going to show you how to get into the yoga poses, why we do certain yoga poses, how to modify them if you need to. So this isn't a real class. This is more so for me just to work through them with you so that you can get an actual visual of these yoga poses, because maybe you've never tried yoga before, maybe you're nervous about yoga, maybe you're just interested in it, or maybe you've been doing yoga for a while and you really don't know exactly why we do certain poses. So I'm going to kind of pull the covers off of yoga a little bit, and I'm going to work through each one of these poses with you, so that when you actually get on the mat, you're able to do them effectively and efficiently. Sound good? Thank you so much again for joining. I see people are starting to join the class, so I'm going to go back here and get ready to start. So yesterday when you joined us, I spent about an hour going through how to breathe, the structure of a yoga class, and then I started to talk about some of the yoga poses. So I want to kind of recap what we learned yesterday. First and foremost, breathing is the most important part of your yoga practice. So if at any time you're feeling overwhelmed in a yoga class, like a certain pose or posture is not working for you, as long as you're breathing in a yoga class, you're doing yoga. So please understand that first and foremost, breathing is the most important part of practice. And yesterday when I gave the demonstration of breathing, take my socks off. Now socks, typically in yoga, we don't wear socks. Sometimes I like to wear socks because my feet get cold, but if we do any standing poses, it tends to make your feet slip. So typically we do yoga without socks. So back to breathing. Breathing is a fundamental part of yoga, and that's because the more you breathe, the more you're getting oxygen in your body. The more oxygen you get in your body, the longer your muscles can elongate, getting you into those poses to stretch more effectively and efficiently. It also basically kind of goes in your body, surges around, and when you're twisting and turning and moving, you're able to, you're basically wringing your muscles in your body out so that all the toxins and things and inflammation that tends to snuggle up in your bones and your muscles and your joints is able to find a way out of your body. So breathing is the number one most important part of a yoga practice. You typically breathe through your nose, and I always say breathe down to your belly. Now I know your lungs are not in your belly, your lungs are about this big, but typically when we breathe, we only breathe in the upper part of our chest. So let's go ahead and breathe real quick, just normal breathing. Just kind of notice your breathing before we start without really forcing it any further than your normal breath. And what you're going to notice is that you're only breathing in the upper part of your chest. Well, we have so much more lung capacity that we do not utilize throughout the day. And what happens is all those toxins and debris and things that we breathe in our nose and our mouth all day long, it settles in the base of our lungs. And once it settles in the base of our lungs, then that is a perfect incubator for mucus and bacteria and viruses and everything to collect and start making us sick. So when you breathe all the way down into your lungs and you breathe with intention, you're pulling it in, you're exhaling, then you're able to transfer and get all that debris out of your body so that you can heal and be healthy. So breathing in and out your nose all the way down to your belly. And if you're not sure if you're breathing down to your belly, place your hand on your belly, inhale, and you want to pull so that you're pulling your diaphragm, which is right here. We want to see if we can pull past the diaphragm, which means that you're going to really pull a lot of air into the lungs. So let's see if we can take 3 long deep breaths before we start our practice today. Inhale through your nose. And exhale. Wonderful. Good. 2 more. Deep breath in. Inhale. And exhale. Good. Wonderful. 1 more of those deep breaths. Sometimes you'll get in a yoga class and what they'll do is they'll actually ask you to do a fire breath or a lion's breath. And basically what that means is you're inhaling through the nose and you are forcefully exhaling out of your mouth. And that is very beneficial because that really gets deep into the lungs, especially if you're not feeling very well. I wouldn't do this around other people, maybe outside, but kind of like a real forceful exhale, and that tries to kind of really shake all the stuff inside of you and get it out. So you'll see us do lion breath sometimes in class. It's kind of fun. Good, excellent. So that's how proper yogic breathing is. Now in class, you'll always notice people start yoga class and they'll be really quiet with their breathing. Well, you want to be loud with your breathing. You want to have intention with your breath. And the reason for that is because your ears need to actually hear you breathing. And when your ears hear you breathing, then it automatically turns on the right part of your body, in which helps you to calm your body. So typically we run through this whole stressful go, go, go day. We live very, very parasympathetically, and we need to turn it over to the sympathetic system, which is more relaxing. So basically, when you breathe really loud, your body thinks you're at rest, then you're able to turn on the right chemicals, and those chemicals will help elongate the body. They clean out all the cortisol and adrenaline. So it all works together. Your body works together. But again, breathing with intention in and out the nose, all the way down to the belly, and loud enough so that you can actually hear yourself breathe. So that's number one, to know. That's the most fundamental concept that I'd like for you to take away from this Yoga 101 class. The structure of a yoga class, you typically start off with gentle breathing, a meditation. This is why we lock our doors at the beginning of a class. I know not all yoga studios do that, but I believe that you deserve a full hour uninterrupted. So we also don't want people to bring their cell phones in, because it keeps you distracted with the outside world. So when you come into our yoga class, you get on your mat, you start to get yourself settled. This is your time. So you paid for a full class, we're gonna give you a full class. So once you get on your mat, you kind of get into your space, you start your deep breathing. You'll do, about 2, maybe 3 minutes of deep breathing. You'll do about 5 to 6 minutes of stretching, very slow stretching. You'll get into the heat of the class, and then you'll do some cool down poses, and then you'll follow that with something called Shavasana. And Shavasana is the meditation at the end of class. So that to me is my most favorite part of class. It's like baking a cake. You're gonna put all that heat into the cake, and it's gonna get nice and juicy and fluffy. Then you have to add the icing at the end. Shavasana is the icing at the end. And sometimes I've been in studios in which people will leave before Shavasana starts, and it makes me insane, because that's the part where everything marinates in your body. That is the most important part of your yoga class. And I get it. Your brain is probably going 100 miles an hour. If you're somebody with anxiety like I had, you can't shut off that brain. And sometimes when you're in Shavasana, thoughts and memories and things that are uncomfortable tends to come up because you're quiet, and sometimes you have to deal with that. And that's because your body is trying to purge that thought. It wants you to acknowledge the thought, and it wants you to figure out if this is the time for you to let it go. So sometimes those thoughts and memories come in a yoga class, and sometimes it's like, whoa, how did that happen? Why did that memory come up? And it's most likely because it's saying, hey, can you let me go now? I'm ready. So yoga is a transformational process. You never really know what's going to happen with your body when you're moving through it. But as long as you remain open to your practice, all kinds of things are going to come in and out of your body. So allow that to happen, because it's very important within your yoga practice to be able to stay open, stay viable, stay aware, so that you can allow that transformation to happen. Do you understand all that? Give me some hearts if you're understanding all that. If I'm talking too fast, I'm just trying to recap what we did yesterday so that we can move into today. So 12 most common yoga poses. I'm going to talk a little bit about those, and I want to explain to you why we do these poses. So, but before I get into those poses, I want you to understand that the yoga poses are the third most important part of a yoga class. There's a lot of transformational work that needs to happen before the yoga poses actually start to work. And those are what's called the yamas and niyamas. Those are the principles and practices that you got to get in your head, so that when you're on the mat, you can utilize those principles and practices to help you have more success with your yoga. So, and those practices are things like having compassion for yourself and others. At my studio, we do not have mirrors, and that's because I don't want you to look around at other people, and I don't want you to judge yourself. against other people. I don't want you to look in the mirror and say, God, I look fat today, or oh my God, I look old today. I don't want any of that. I want you to come and get on the mat and be who you are that day. Be proud of who you are that day. The number one principle of yoga is compassion, not only for others, right, but for yourself. So your body changes on a daily basis, and sometimes it wants to play and sometimes it doesn't. Our job is to allow your body to be what it is that day as it shows up that day. Does that make sense? And it's going to change. Even for practitioners who's been doing it for a long time, your body is going to change on a regular basis. So 12 most common yoga poses. Let's go ahead and get through them. Are you ready? First and foremost, there's different types of equipment that you're going to see in a yoga studio. My favorite is the bolster. The bolster helps to enhance poses. It helps for you to elongate poses, hold poses longer. It's really good for a class called restorative. Restorative helps you relax into a pose more. It gives you that, it gives you something just like your pillow on your bed where you can get into it. That's what the bolster helps you get to as well. We typically always have a blanket with us. Blankets are really good for helping to soften the knees. So if you end up having issues with your knees, just throw a blanket up underneath. It's also really awesome for Shavasana at the end because you can cover up with it or use it as a chest pillow to help with people who have anxiety. If you put it on your chest, it helps to kind of comfort you. This is a yoga block. Yoga blocks are an extension of the arm. It helps with stability. You can use it on your feet. You can use it up underneath your hips. So it basically helps us hold poses better. And again, like I said, and it's a stabilizer. So depending on how we're using it, whatever body part we're using it on, it helps us stay structured. And then a yoga strap. This is a strap. Straps allow you to extend. So like say I'm trying to reach my toes and I can't reach my toes, I'm going to grab a strap and the strap is going to help me reach my toes. Or maybe I'm using the strap to help give me an enhanced stretch. So look, just like this. Maybe I need that to help my stretch right here in the chest. Or maybe I'm trying to figure out and create more flexibility in the shoulders. So a strap is good. If you don't have a strap, you find a belt or a sash or a scarf, it's fine. Don't spend a lot of money on yoga, my friends. Yoga should not be an elite sport. It should not be for people who can afford it. It should be for all of us, and that again is one of the missions of OmTurtle, is to try to make yoga accessible and affordable to everyone. So let's go ahead and get on the mat. Are you ready? I'm going to go ahead and put my equipment to the side, and I'm going to go through some of the most common yoga poses. The first common yoga pose that most everybody knows about is the down dog, and the down dog is basically really, really good for stretching from the top of the head to the bottom of the heels, okay? So when your head is below your heart, it helps to soothe and relax and calm the mind. You're going to get a nice deep hamstring stretch, and you're going to feel it in your low back. It does not matter if your heels are on the ground or if they're up. It's just kind of do what your body does. The one thing I want you to be mindful of, I want you to think of your tailbone. I want you to flip your tailbone up towards the sky when you're doing this so that it helps to give yourself a much better upside down V pose. Are you ready? So I'm going to go ahead and lift myself up. My hands are shoulder width apart. My feet are hips width apart. We're going to lift all the way up and we're going to press back with our heels, okay? Now you're going to want to be looking at me so that you can see that you're doing it right, but ideally your head is going to be dangled in between your biceps, just like this. So sometimes people will curl or have kind of some funky stuff in their back, and you might at first because your body's not used to this. It's really difficult in your upper body if you don't have that upper body strength, but you will the more you practice yoga. So I always like to tell my people to press their chest to their thighs, which automatically flips the tailbone up. And you'll hold these poses. This is a transitional pose. You'll see it a lot in yoga. Your feet are hips width apart. Hands are shoulder width apart. Remember that. If this is hard for you, you can always drop down into what's called puppy pose, which is basically dropping down to your knees right here. Now from here, a more challenging pose is your plank pose. Now if you want to know if your down dog is correct, when you slide out into your plank, there should be no movement in your hands or your feet. So go ahead and slide down into your plank. Now when you get into your plank, your options for modifications there is you can drop to your knees. If you do decide to drop to your knees though, make sure you have a long body and don't drop your knees all the way down here, unless you want to, of course, that's totally fine. There's no rules in yoga as long as you're safe. So lifting up into your down dog, out into your plank, just like that. Drop to your knees if you need to for a modification. Perfect, wonderful. From here, let's chaturanga. So chaturanga is basically a reverse push-up. It's probably one of my favorite to say because it's fun, it rolls off the tongue. So you can do that typically from a plank or from a supported plank, and you'll drop your chest down just like that and peel up typically into a cobra, which is right here, okay? So let's try that again. So you are in a down dog, let's go ahead and flow. Down dog plank, drop to your knees if you need to. Dropping your chest down. Now many of us will go like this and our bellies will drop down first. And that will typically happen with our beginners, especially if you're a little bit more heavier in the midsection. That's okay. Just try to think about your arms. Think about your arms being stronger. So laying your chest down first before the belly drops. Ready? Let's try that again. Here we go. Drop. Good. Peel. Lift for cobra. Wonderful. Now cobra is not a pose that a lot of our backs like to do. Sometimes my back does not like to do a cobra, my low back. So instead of pulling up in a full cobra, you can modify just like this by having your elbows directly underneath your shoulders. This is called a Sphinx pose. And you'll be right here. Good. When you're doing cobra pose is really good for helping with the digestive system. It also helps to give you that flexibility that you need in your back. But like I said, sometimes those poses can be hard. So if you need to modify, or if you need to do a baby cobra, you don't have to come all the way up. Pull your elbows in close, bring your hands to your chest, and just lift your face. Right here is good. Just like this. Wonderful. So that is your cobra pose. Excellent. Let's go ahead and come up onto our hands and knees. Yesterday I called these the bingo, the free pass and the bingo square. So you know when you're playing bingo and you've got that free pass in the center where you immediately get to put a dot, right? Child pose and cat-cow to me are your free pass bingo square. So if you're ever doing a pose or your instructor is doing something that your body is not ready for or you're just not feeling it, you could always come down into what's called a cat-cow, which is right here, or a child pose, which is basically sitting back on your heels and extending your hands out in front of you. Now, the longer you extend your hands out in front of the mat, you're gonna feel a beautiful stretch cultivating right here. So why don't you go ahead and try it. Reach all the way to the top of your mat, sink your hips back, rest them on top of your heels, good. And then rest your forehead down on the mat. Now, we do this a lot in a yoga class. It is actually also considered the surrender pose. So I'd like for you to think about that when you're practicing that pose, because you are vulnerable here. You are in a position where you are almost like you're begging or you're in prayer, or, you know, it depends on how you feel in that pose. But it's a vulnerable type, childlike pose, which is why it's called child pose. So think about that when you are so close to the mat and you are surrendering. What exactly are you surrendering? We typically put our forehead on the mat when we do this pose. So many times I like to think about my mat as a magic carpet, a magic mat, in which whatever I don't need in my mind tends to seep out into that mat. So however you want to envision that pose, that is your pose that you can basically surrender. Whatever you don't need for the day, you can surrender it right into your child pose. Does that make sense? Is that fun? Good. Coming up into your cat-cow right here. I know I'm moving fast, but I only have 45 minutes to get to you. Cat-cow is right here. This is the pose, the sequence that I love to do before I go to bed because it unlocks any yuckiness that I might have in my spine. It also kind of flushes my head of any tension or tightness that I might have. It's really good for my low back. I tend to have a lot of issues right here because I work at the cafe, so I'm always on my feet a lot. So my pain problems is right here where I would wear a belt. This helps to elongate and basically soothe that space. So a cow is basically dropping the belly button down, lifting the face, and flipping that tailbone up behind you. just like that. And then cat is just like a scared cat. You're rounding into the back, tucking the chin into the chest, arching, pushing into the palms, and lifting up into the sky. Dropping your belly button down, lifting the tail, lifting the face. Good, just like that. And then arching the back. That's cat-cow. So anytime you're opening a pose, you're inhaling. Anytime you're closing a pose, you're exhaling. So right here, I'm opening a pose because my lungs are open. When I close a pose, I'm exhaling because I'm closing my lungs, right? So now that you know that, let's revisit. So we're gonna go up into a down dog, right? Excellent, we're in a down dog, then we're coming out into our plank. So our plank pose, we're opening. Are we opening or closing? From here, we close, inhale, open, exhale, and inhale, because we just opened up into a cobra, we just opened our lungs. Does that make sense? So then if we are cat-cowing, we exhale here, because we're collapsing the lungs, and we're inhaling here, because we're opening the lungs. Does that sound good? Wonderful. Yay, good. All right, so I want to go through a few more with you. Let's talk about pigeon pose, because this is the pose that's going to freak you out in class, because you're not sure if you're going to be able to do it. It freaks everybody out. But once your body gets used to it, you will end up hopefully loving it at some point. But I want to introduce it to you so you can at least see what it looks like and all the different modifications for it, okay? But promise me you're not going to get freaked out, okay? So pigeon pose, and I'm going to show you the modification, so hang tight, don't turn off yet. So all the way up. Typically when we get into a pigeon pose, we have you lift a leg, bend the knee, and I have you set it down just like this. Now when you're sitting down into a pigeon pose, that knee needs to be at a hook. That leg needs to be at a hook. That heel needs to be snuggled up into that opposite hip, okay? So right now my right leg is hooked, my right heel is aligned with my left hip, okay? If you have your leg like this, it's gonna put unnecessary pressure on your kneecap, so you don't wanna do that. You wanna bring your foot out like this, align it with that hip, then turn, pivot, so that you're on top of it. Your left leg is long, and you are on the top of your foot back there, okay? Your arms, notice how my arms are directly underneath my shoulders. So I have wrist, elbow, shoulder. Remember that, anytime you're holding a pose, you wanna make sure that your joints are stacked on top of one another, but they're not locked. They have to be soft, okay? Now I'm gonna lift my face, and I'm gonna go right like this. Hang tight if you want a modification, hold on. All right, so we're lifting just like this. One of the options, if you cannot hold a pose like this, is to take a block and place it up underneath that hip on the other side. That gives me more stability. If I've decided that I wanna move into more advanced poses, I might come up, reach back, grab onto that foot, which will give me a little bit more of a thigh stretch here. And if I'm even more advanced and I get to that point, I might keep working it into my elbow. And then I might even go into a full king, in which I'm right here. So there's multiple ways in which you can get into this pose. Don't freak out if you're brand new, okay? This takes a while to get here. Modification for this pose simply is to lay on your back. So when they say pigeon pose, and you're like, not for me, you're gonna do what's called dead pigeon. Yep, that's what's called, dead pigeon. So you're gonna lay on your back, and you're gonna bring that foot in, and you're just gonna cross it over, just like you would if you were upside down, right? And if you need help, grab your strap, lasso your foot, and pull it in. That is your dead pigeon. Will that work for you? One of those? Good. And since we're down here, let's go ahead and work through a few more poses. So this one's happy baby. Sometimes people will have you, your instructor will have you grab the outside of your feet or the inside of your feet. I don't really care, whatever works for you. Pulling your knees down to the ground helps to expose your groin space. This is the pose that people worry about the most, that they are going to pass gas. If you are worried that you're going to pass gas in yoga class, you will. We all do. So don't worry about it. It happens. All right? And you're not laughed at. It's expected during a yoga class. So don't worry. When we're here, we're going to rock from side to side. And it feels really, really good on that low back. I might extend my feet upwards and I might reach for my toes. Ooh, this feels very cheeky today. One of my favorite things to do is to cross my legs over and kind of hold here. If I do decide to do this, I will take my hand and I will place it on the outside of my shin or the inside of my thigh, or I can just hold right here. So you have lots of different options when you're stretching in a yoga class. And mind you, if your body just does not do this, that's okay. You will start learning poses and postures the more you practice, and you will learn that you can modify in any way. So if this does not work for your body and your knees, you can always do anything else. You can find anything. You can just kind of crunch it in. You can have your feet down on the ground and maybe just sway those knees back and forth. Remember, the instructor is there just to give you options, but it is your body and your practice, and you are allowed to do whatever you want. I always tell people in my classes to work to your edge and not beyond your edge, because if you push yourself too far, you could risk injury. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep you supple and safe because you want to be ready and able to do the next class. So take your time in your poses. Since I'm here, let me show you just a couple hip openers here. So let's take your left leg and cross it over your right. We're going to shift up our hips and shift it over to the left, and then bring both knees down to the floor on the right-hand side. Now when you do that, we like to open up our arms as a T, and what that does is that helps us to balance our body. So this arm here is helping to balance the knees being on this side. And what it does is it helps to really stretch out the hip space here. It gives you a nice long line here. But what if you can't cross your legs? That's not a big deal. You can always stack your knees on top of one another. Good. And then let's go ahead and try the other side. I am moving through these poses rather quickly. You typically hold poses from 3 to 5 breaths, sometimes longer depending on the kind of class you have. I'm just giving you a snippet of what it looks like. The reason why I'm shifting my hips to the right while I drop my knees to the left is because you want your hips to be stacked on top of one another. We don't want to cause any issues with your sciatic nerve here. We don't want to cause any issues with splitting your hips. Your hips don't split. We don't want that. So we're just trying to align the hips. We're always thinking about alignment in our yoga poses. Open those arms nice and wide, palms facing up. Good. Yesterday I talked a lot more about meditation at the beginning of class, about what the finger symbols mean, different kinds of mudras. So if you want to revisit that class, it was at 8 o'clock yesterday, Monday the 23rd. You can scroll through our feed and find those. All of this will be posted on YouTube too. My wonderful, amazing Renee, who is making it all happen for us behind the scenes, is busy posting this all on YouTube. Go ahead and come back to center. Let's go ahead and pull the knees into chest, just to kind of give yourself a little bit of rock. Always think about closing a pose. So when I go to one side and one to the other, I want to balance in the center. Good. So there is that. How you doing? You doing okay out there? Wonderful. All right, let's get into some standing poses. Are you ready? We still got 15 minutes before we end class, so we're getting right through all of these poses. This isn't a traditional yoga class. This is me basically talking you through the poses because I just want you to understand, number one, how to get into the pose, how to modify the pose, and how to enhance the pose if you'd like to, and get into it safely and realize and recognize that you can actually do yoga. So let's go ahead and stand up. Everybody stand up. Good. Now this is called the mountain pose or standing pose. And your legs need to be hips width apart. So hip bone width, not hip flesh width. So you'll be right here. Go ahead and lengthen and elongate those legs. And I always say, everyone, rock back on your heels, open your toes, and then claw the mat with your toes. You want your toes to be engaged. And then as you do this, press the necks of your toes into the mat. And all of a sudden, you feel more secure and more stable. So let's practice that again. Just kind of wiggle out of that and stand, right? When you stand, you're probably soft in your knees or you're soft in your body. I could easily come and push you over right now, right? But if you roll back on your heels and you open your toes and then kind of press the necks of your toes down. All of a sudden, I bet if I came up to try to push you over, I wouldn't be able to do it because you're strong. That's your mountain pose. So you'll see people here with their hands wide. You'll see people here, sometimes here. It really depends on what your class is all about, but this is your mountain pose, my friends. A lot of times we'll say sweep your hands up high, inhale, and then we'll say swan dive. Swan dive, you're basically hinging at the hips. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the side. You're hinging at the hips and you're forward folding. Forward folding is a very simple pose, but it is so good for the entire body, and there's so many things that you can do when you're in a forward fold, okay? So forward fold is right here. You might not be able to touch the floor. Maybe you're up here, or you're up here. Not a big deal. Just allow your shoulders to open up and round into the back. Kind of sling the hands down, right? Relax so that this opens up. See how I have that nice arch in my back? I'm going to actually start to feel a stretch from the back of my head, maybe even the top of my head, all the way down to my ankles if I'm doing it right. So come on down, and you know, if you can, couple options. You can tuck your fingers up underneath your toes if you want. You can grab the backs of your ankles. You can wrap your arms behind your knees. And you'll notice you can do some fun things in your forward fold. So while you're here, notice, go ahead and wrap your arms. So if you bend, it's a different stretch. You're gonna feel it more here. And then if you straighten your knees, you're gonna feel it more in your hamstrings. So there's a lot of things that you can do in regards. If you grab your ankles and kind of pull, you're gonna enhance the stretch there. If you tuck your hands underneath your toes, then you're able to kind of do a lift upwards, which is gonna stretch your back. That might be more advanced. Don't worry about that if you can't reach your toes. But if you can't reach, grab onto your block and rest your hands on your block. Remember, there's always options. This is your forward fold. Sometimes we'll be in a forward fold and we'll have you do some stretching. So you know, notice how I bent my knee. My knee wants to be there, so if your body wants to move a certain way, let it. Lifting up and do a nice stretch here, just like that. Coming down and opening up on the other side. Are you following? Good. I can even do a standing cat-cow from here on top of my block. And a block doesn't mean that you are weak. A block doesn't mean that you are inexperienced. A block means, I like to use a block because it helps structure my poses. It helps me guide my pose better. Good. So this is like a standing cat-cow. Excellent. That is your forward fold. How's that? You all doing okay? Wonderful. Let's get into a few of the warriors now. I'm cheating with the list over here just to make sure I don't forget anything. Ooh, crazy hair. I have crazy hair. Oh, that's why I have my hair in a green bandana all the time, because it's a lot. There's a lot going on. Okay, so I'm going to start. We're going to work into our warrior poses, okay? So long body, long legs. You following me now? We're going to step forward with our right foot. We're going to step back with our left foot. The left foot is going to go at a slight angle, okay? Your ankles are going to control your pose. So if your ankles feel like you want to be turned in, then you need to turn in. And I know some instructors will be like, no, that's not right. But we don't want to force your joints, your bones to do anything that you can't, that they're not designed to do. You and I are built completely differently. Sometimes some of us, our joints and our bones want to turn inwards, some want to turn outwards. So that doesn't mean that you and I can do the pose exactly the same. That's why it makes us amazing and unique. So we're stepping back and we're going to try for a slight angle with that back foot. We're going to come forward and we're going to hover that right knee over the ankle, okay? And we're going to try to see if we can turn our hips towards that front knee as best as we can. So this is also a rotation thing. So if your hips don't like to rotate, you might be more here. But maybe the more you work, maybe you'll end up turning, but maybe you won't because your bones are there. It's bone on bone, okay? So we're gonna inhale and lift our arms up for our warrior one, just like that. Looking down to make sure that knee didn't move. Look back and make sure you have a nice deep bend in that left leg. Yes? So we're right here. Perfect. Good. That's your warrior one. Try not to go too far forward. Just kind of stay head, heart, hips stacked on top of one another unless your instructor guides you forward. If your instructor guides you forward, that might mean that they're trying to get you into a warrior three or maybe a balance pose, which might look like this, where you're kind of lunging, leaning, and lifting. And if that's the case, then it looks more like this, which is a warrior three. And lifting all the way up. But that is more of an advanced pose, but that is an option. Okay, so we're here in warrior one. We're gonna pivot and turn that back foot. So now that back foot is parallel with the back of the mat. When that back foot comes parallel, our arms come down into a warrior two. Our gaze is in front of us. Go ahead and try. Our palm is typically right above the toes. So if you're wondering if you are aligned, your palm is probably more so on the toes or maybe that top part of the foot if you were to think about alignment. That right knee should have stayed hovered over the ankle. Sometimes this back arm likes to get lazy on us, so we just need to watch. And our gaze is over our middle finger. Good. You're gonna notice some strength building in the thigh. You can flip your palms if you wanted to, and that would give you a different sensation in your arms. If you want to get crazy and you want to do your warrior flip or warrior twist, twisted warrior, you will let that back foot turn. This is an advanced pose. And move into a twisted warrior. You'll sink that left knee down further and you'll open up. Good, wonderful. Let's pivot and turn and try the other side. Pivot, turn. Good, turn, turn, turn. We're getting into our warrior one. Back foot at a slight angle. Hands, toes, knee is over the ankle. Hands are lifting. Good. I always like to imagine your eyes lift with your hands. I always like to imagine holding the world in my hands, or maybe my kids or my affirmations, my intentions. I'm holding them high. Good. Lift. Lift, lift, lift. Beautiful. Now let's open up. Pivot the back heel into a warrior two. Good, open. Check that back arm. Make sure it's not getting slobby on you. Good, just checking for questions. Oh, good. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Okay, excellent. You got this. And then how about we try that warrior, that twisted warrior, because we did it on the other side. Ready? Back foot lifts, turns. We drop down into the knee, and we twist our warrior. Good. Come on forward. If you do have questions, post them. I will look at them later today, and I will be happy to answer those for you. So go ahead and come forward. Now we're going to turn our toes forward, and we're going to work into what's called a wide-legged forward fold. What this is going to do is we're actually going to hinge ourselves forward. We're going to hinge from the hips. This is a really awesome pose if you have hip problems, if you have short hamstrings. A lot of guys have short hamstrings, which is why when they forward fold, they're kind of like this, like T-Rex arms. They can't get down because they have really short hamstrings, which is why sometimes in sports they get injured easier than others. So this is a great practice for all of us, but especially the men in our lives. So coming forward, hinging at the hips, down, and then reaching as far as you can to the floor. You can always place a block there if you need to, so that you have that support. Turning your toes inwards or outwards is going to change the sensation of the stretch. My toes right now are slightly turned inwards. Coming all the way down, perfect. Excellent, come all the way up. And my last pose of the day, I want to show you a tree pose. I know we're going through these very quickly, but I only have 3 more minutes to get as much as I can in you today. But we're going to continue this tomorrow at 8 o'clock. We're going to do this Yoga 101 for beginners all week long, so that when you're ready to take a class, you'll be rocking and rolling. After this class is a slow flow class, which is going to be perfect for you. So if you want to try it out, feel free to do so. Try. Just see where you are today, okay? So let's practice a quick little balance pose before we end our class today. This is called a tree pose. Tree pose, you need your body to be in a mountain pose, just like we started. We're going to take our right knee, we're going to turn it, And we're gonna put our foot inwards, as you can see here, so that your heel is just above your ankle. Make sure your hips don't get all sassy on you. You gotta bring your hips in and up. Make sure your head, heart, hips are stacked on top of one another. Good. Hands at heart center. Good. This is station 1. This is station 2. This is station 3. Notice I bypassed the knee. Please, 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 for the love of God, do not put your toes or your heel anywhere on your kneecap, because you will lock your knee, and if you fall, you're gonna injure your knee. So we don't wanna even flirt with that kneecap. You're gonna want to, because that's your bone and that's your stability. You think that, but that's not good for this other knee. It's not gonna be happy with you. So on your calf, on your thigh, or on your ankle. You can also use a block if you need to, just to kind of get your way up there to the calf, so that if you are learning, you can always tap your toes down while you're finding that balance. Sound good? All right, let's try the other side. So we've got, make sure the hips don't get sassy. In and up, long body, hands at heart center. And once you get really good at tree, you can always do some fun stuff. Inhaling and exhaling, heart center, playing around with it. Calf, station 2. And you would typically hold each one of these a minute, 3 to 5 breaths. And then station 3. Again, I'm just popping you through it so you can see it. And we're not gonna touch the knee. Yes, stay away from the knee. Wonderful. All right, folks, that's all I have for you today. Tomorrow we'll work more on balance poses. We'll work on some standing things, get through all of the yoga poses so that when you're ready to take classes, you will be confident and ready to go. So thank you so much for joining us today. Slow flow class starts in 15 minutes. Join me.